We have some fabulous people who come and join us on our podcast, people just like us. Thank you for tuning in today. We're really glad that you have decided to join us for this amazing podcast that I got the pleasure of recording with Emma Jackson from the Citizens Advice Bureau. It's a fascinating conversation. It goes all over the place, but real themes in there about poverty, social justice, and about how all that impacts our mental health and well-being. I hope you really enjoy this as much as I enjoyed having the conversation with Emma. I'm joined by Emma Jackson. Emma's going to have a chat with us, just as people just like us. That's what we do on this podcast. So, Emma, you are really welcome. I'm so glad that you've been able to come. Sometimes we get to do these podcasts on across the internet, and other times we have folks in the office here and we actually record in person, and we're doing across the internet today. So by the wonders of modern technology, we can connect and have this conversation, and hopefully people will even be able to see the video of it when we're actually finished. If not, they'll be listening to the audio of this somewhere.
Great stuff.
So why don't you introduce yourself, Emma? Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah. So thanks very much for having me, Shona. It's really great to be here and kind of have this conversation. So yeah, I'm Emma. Doing this remotely is brilliant for me because I stay in the borders, really quite rurally, like in a wee village without a shop, with my husband and our three children and an ever-growing menagerie of animals. I need to say no the next time somebody says, "Can we have?" But yeah, that's a wee bit about me. I work for Citizens Advice Scotland. I've recently just started as the social justice strategic lead. So that's leading the portfolio of social justice work. So that includes everything from social security to housing, employment, and a just transition to net zero. So yeah, a big remit. But at the heart of that, making sure that citizens really are at the heart of that work, and that we're working to improve things for people who are here in Scotland. It's a new job for me. I only made the transition just before Christmas. Previously, I had been working for Christians Against Poverty, a debt help and anti-poverty charity. I had the great privilege of leading the work in Scotland. I did that for about 5 years. But probably as you're starting to develop a bit of a theme of things for me in life, social justice and justice more generally is something I'm really passionate about. Another thing I do with my time is that I'm a convener for the Church of Scotland. I get the privilege of convening the work of public life and social justice, which is a really great thing to kind of be involved with in my spare time. There is some, I promise.
Yeah, all that spare time with three children and a menagerie of animals.
Yeah. I did joke. Someone else said that to me recently. It's like, how do you do those things? But I'm genuinely somebody who's better busy. Yeah, absolutely got to have boundaries to that. And, burnout is real and we've got to keep an eye on that. But I am probably someone who thrives in a space of kind of being busy.
Yeah, fabulous. So you've said two or three times in that, just in that wee tiny bit of conversation, you've talked about social justice.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that. What is, because people listening might not actually know what that is. So why don't you tell us a wee bit about that? I kind of putting you on the spot here. Can you find us a definition? That's a big
Oh,
question.
yeah.
How did you get involved in that? What is it about that draws you?
Oh, great question. So yeah, what do I think social justice is? I think it's making sure the things in our society, the structures and the systems and the governance and how we organize ourselves, I guess, is equitable and just, so that everybody in society can participate. I'm really passionate about the idea of flourishing and that everybody gets the opportunity to flourish. And I guess if we are able to achieve that social justice, that all being well, all things being equal, that people should be able to have that opportunity to flourish. How did I get involved? Great question. I guess my career has really always been focused on tackling inequality. After finishing up at university, the first real job that I had in this space was involving disability and education, and it massively opened my eyes, I guess, to the inequality that disabled people face and the barriers that exist in society. And actually, it's removing those barriers that enables participation for people. And so I did that for quite a bit of time, and then it was actually really volunteering through my local church that really started to open my eyes to the injustice of poverty, and how sadly endemic poverty is. And that was at a point in my life where the children were really little, and I'd taken a career break, and I was thinking about like what do I do kind of next, and never went back to the disability education space. And then started to get involved in the anti-poverty sector, and yeah, that's kind of where I am too. So I guess it's something that deeply resonates with me, and so it's
Yeah.
both a personal passion and a career as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that word flourishing is really interesting, isn't it? And we would talk about that as well. We would talk about that's the stuff that we do here at Healing for the Heart. It's about how we help people to transform the situations that they're in order that they're able to flourish.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there are things that you can think of that stop people from flourishing. So what are you seeing just now? I know you've just moved into this job
Yeah.
relatively recently, but obviously with lots of experience round about that whole sector. What are the things, particularly in our culture just now, that stop people from flourishing?
Yeah. I think folks listening to this probably don't need too much of a reminder about just actually how difficult it is for folks at the moment, just living and affording things. That this cost of living crisis, is going nowhere fast, and for so many households, being able to afford the essentials that we all need is not even just really difficult; it's actually impossible for sadly an ever increasing number of households. And that was something I saw at Christians Against Poverty, and that's certainly something that the network of citizens advice bureaus all across Scotland see. That there's 59 bureaus across Scotland, some in really urban communities, others in much more rural communities. And yes, the issues are different depending on where you are, but this thing about households really struggling at the moment is probably a really big issue. And the reality of not having enough money to live is just all consuming for people. It has such a deeply detrimental impact on all aspects of people's lives. Their physical well-being, their mental well-being, and I think that's really just one of the biggest issues that we're seeing across the sector right now. The toll that's taking on people.
Yeah, and where are you seeing where are you seeing the bright things? Where are you seeing the diamonds in the midst of that? What's working for people? What's making the difference?
Yeah, because we've got to remember it whilst it's bleak, it is not hopeless. And there's so much good happening out there in communities. I'm always so inspired by the sort of individual action that's happening within local communities as people are out there, supporting their neighbours, their friends, people at the school gates, and just helping. And I think where one of the bright spots is seeing people have that agency to be able to improve their own circumstances. And I think that's part of the real power of the Citizens Advice Network, is about being able to get advice, to learn more about your situation and what positive steps that you can take forward, in the right direction, be that like improving your financial circumstances by doing an income maximization exercise and actually making sure you're getting all the money that's coming in, things like that. So there's definitely good things happening out there, and I just keep being reminded time and time again about the power of community.
Yeah.
And even though things are difficult, we don't have to face these things by ourselves.
Yep. And there's something really important in that, isn't there? We've been doing We've done quite a bit of work round about isolation and the impact of isolation that has on people, and it's the flip side to that, isn't it? That there's something about strength in being together. There's something about how we recognise that we're not alone and we're not the only one that's dealing with what's there, and we can actually support one another. And lots of that, lots of what you said there, I think will resound with the people listening to this who already know what we as an organisation do, because it's a very similar thing. It's actually about helping people to see that there is a way forward, and actually something can turn around. We can actually help. We can actually move forward together. What is that? I know that we certainly are seeing the impact of the financial crisis as a charity. We feel the impact of the financial crisis for us, like many other charities do at the moment. But we're also seeing that in terms of folks coming through the door, and the impact that it's having on them, the levels of anxiety and stress, things that people have been able to deal with for a long time. And they've been okay, that suddenly all of this stuff actually has tipped that back over the edge again. Obviously, you know, you're connected with Healing for the Heart. I don't know whether you want to, and I know how we connected in terms of this podcast. You're welcome to go on and have a conversation about. But what is your connection with Healing for the Heart? How do you know the organisation?
Yeah, so when I worked for Christians Against Poverty, I guess one of the things we were always really keen to keep focusing on is how are we supporting our staff, you know, who are out there drawing alongside people experiencing really difficult circumstances, because obviously first and foremost that's hugely detrimental for the individual experiencing that, but it has the potential to be really detrimental for those who are working in those environments, who are not just hearing, you know, one difficult set of circumstances, but multiple, day in, day out, week in, week out. And so, like lots of third sector organisations, we wanted to make sure we were equipping our staff. So you guys came along and did some training at a conference and really just helped people to feel that bit more equipped about what do I do when my own well-being is feeling a bit stretched, you know, when I've come away from something that's really upsetting, or made me really angry. I think that's quite a common emotion that we hear from lots of staff at the moment, that what they're seeing out there in communities is heartbreaking and it's outrageous, and people feel angry that you know their neighbour, that their fellow citizen, you know, is kind of experiencing that. And so it was great to do that kind of bit of equipping for staff to help people just feel that bit more confident about how to look after themselves in these circumstances.
Yeah. And it was great to be there and be part of that. It was a really interesting afternoon to work in. I know, so we've kind of tracked round about the flourishing thing and some of the things that are stopping from people from being able to flourish in the way that we would want. We've talked a wee bit about the social justice stuff and what that's about, and working for justice. And I suppose if you were to tie all of that up and think about, you know, all of these things that are there just now in terms of the work that you're doing, or maybe even in terms of you personally, where are you seeing the issues for people, particularly around about mental and emotional health? What do you see the impact of that looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a work perspective, as we sort of touched on, it's the brutality of the circumstances for many people, how that's taken a toll. So one of the things we've been being really vocal about at Citizens Advice Scotland just at the very beginning of this year is around energy issues. You know, we're recording this today. We were just saying at the start, like, it's freezing cold today, you know, and we've got this juxtaposition being freezing cold and energy is super expensive. And that means that households are just facing really impossible sets of situations. And unfortunately, people are rationing their gas and electric, or they're simply going without. And the toll that that's taken on people's physical and mental well-being is awful. That there's no other way really to describe it. You know, sitting in a cold and even dark home is pretty soul destroying, especially when it's hard for you to see when is that thing gonna get better. So I think that that's some of the issues that we're seeing, and it's part of a wider context of this reality that too many households have what's described as like a broken budget. There is inadequate income coming in to pay for all of the things that we need, and so that's something that we're seeing out there for people. And it reminds me of just kind of what you were saying about like where are the bright spots. And so even as I described that, like it's awful and it's really hard, and we've got to eyeball the reality of it. But the thing where I massively hold on to hope is that it does not have to be like that. That is not the end chapter in a book like that. We have an opportunity as a society to do something different about that, to organise and structure ourselves differently, be that like social tariffs for energy that are more affordable, or actually wider, that as a society we would make a decision that actually we believe every citizen should have enough money to live a decent, dignified and a healthy life. And there's this idea that the Scottish Government are working up at the moment called a minimum income guarantee. Tiny bit of a mouthful, but in the absolute like layperson terms, it's about everybody having enough. And I just think that's something that we can kind of all get behind, is the idea of everyone having enough.
And that kind of hope thing is really important for people, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the things that we see here. Sometimes when folks arrive here for support, they've been shunted from pillar to post. They've tried and tried and tried to find somebody who can support them, and they're sent from one department or one organisation or one service to another. And at every service, they're told, no, we can't help. There's nothing that we can do. We don't have the resources. And that depletion of hope in people actually has a massive impact on their well-being, on their emotional and mental well-being. And I guess that it's how we start to even begin to almost shine a light on the hope for people that's there. I mean, I suppose listening to you, part of the social justice thing must be about being the voice for people who perhaps don't have that voice, and in that you bring some hope as well.
Yeah, I think it's a both and, but in that space, I see part of my work as social justice as sometimes being that voice, but actually, moreover, what does it look like for me and colleagues to make sure that those who are closest to the issues that we're describing, those with lived experience, that their own voice is actually heard. And I often think about, sometimes my role is about like quieting the noise and clearing the space, so that people have that agency to speak for themselves, and that we make sure that we are co-producing the solutions that we need as a society, alongside those who are like at the sharp end of the issues right now, that really meaningful kind of collaboration. So yeah, I think it's both and. Like I'm a reasonably gobby person, like I don't need too much encouragement to speak up on an issue, and so often the challenge for me is making sure actually it's not your voice, Emma, that's the right voice. It's like, how do you make sure that we're really hearing from and listening to those that are affected by these situations the most?
Yeah, and I guess that ties in with some of the things that we find as well, that very often folks who come to us have spent a long time with services doing things to them. And it's a very clinical model, and you can have a clinical model within social justice the same way you could have a clinical model within a clinical service. And it's about how you actually help people to get that agency where they're the people that then are the expert in their own life. So we would talk about that. We're not the experts in your life, you are. And so how then do we move forward in the midst of all of this?
Yeah.
And surely, and that ties back into the community conversation earlier on. So when you start to help individuals feel empowered, then you actually start to have whole communities, so that these individuals become the catalyst for change in their community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we look at these big issues that we've got in society, around poverty, around the climate crisis, even like mental health and the issues that are there, I think we'll only begin to solve these in a collective approach, because they all are about all of us, and we all benefit when all of us are well and healthy and participants in our own communities. And there's absolutely roles for government in this. I don't ever want to shy away from government, being responsible for the things that they must and should do, but also that sits alongside the power of individuals and the power of communities to bring about the change, I guess, that we need to see.
Yeah, and when you actually start to change, when you actually start to see communities changed for the better, and where people can actually heat their houses because they can afford to do it, then actually you start to see differences it manifesting in lots of different places. So people's well-being does improve, their mental health improves, their physical health improves, their ability to engage with education or with services or with employment,
Absolutely.
all of it improves because
Yeah.
you're not in the place where you look around and there's hopelessness and you just can't do anything about it. You're paralyzed by that.
Yeah, it's that, how can we expect people to take positive steps forward in other areas when like the baseline of essentials isn't there? And we've got to bring that up for absolutely everybody so that it's like, we're all starting at the same point on a running race. Whereas at the moment, people are starting so far back, yet have no chance of trying to get to the destination that we need to. So I know there's no silver bullet,
Yeah.
in how we solve some of the issues that we face as a society. But I think everyone's having this floor that we say we will not let people fall below is a very, very good starting point for the things that we're thinking about.
I think just as you're speaking there, and I hadn't even thought on this before, but just as you're speaking, I'm wondering whether or not I know we're talking about individuals and we're talking about households and we're talking about individual people, and the empowerment there or the agency there, and the baseline stuff. I wonder if there's something in that extends out into society in terms of service provision as well. Because I'm thinking about the disparity that there is in terms of those of us who are involved in supporting people to get to that place, and those of us that, there seems to be, like there is for individuals, an unfair distribution of resources in terms of how we do that. So there are organisations who are trying to do stuff on an absolute shoestring because they don't have anything else. But in actual fact, the stuff they do is vital, is really, really good stuff. They're making a massive difference, but actually
Yeah.
all the resources are going over here because I don't know why, because I could be cynical and say because somebody's shouting louder over there. So maybe there's a whole societal thing in terms of how
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sort of how do we make sure the resources that we have are distributed in an equitable way, and getting to the right communities, the right organisations, and that could be everything from like our travel infrastructure, access to healthcare, social care, kind of schools, all of those things, because they're all kind of part of this whole conversation that we're talking about, because all those things intersect, don't they, with people's overall well-being and how they navigate the world. And I live, as I've already mentioned, I live pretty rurally, so the experience of people in rural communities to be able to access stuff is so different from those living urban kind of communities. Like if you want to go to lots of things from where I'm based, it's an hour's drive each way to kind of the bigger places where kind of stuff's happening. And that cuts across conversations of like affordability, and then even things like digital provision, or telecommunications. So like none of our mobile phones work in our house, like the actual phone signal, because we're in a valley and we're in a dip, so we don't get any phone signal in our house. And it's a silly thing, but also like if you were reliant upon that, we have Wi-Fi in the house, so we can run off like Wi-Fi for WhatsApp and things like that. But if you're relying on phone signal, again, the potential to become the isolation,
Yeah.
not able to participate, those
Yeah.
kind of barriers exist. So you're right, Shona, like this conversation's like multifaceted in terms of what it is for people. I always try and think about it. It's like a stool, isn't it? And if we don't have the legs, and so I think like income is definitely a leg on the stool, but access to services is another leg on the stool. And if you don't have one of these, the stool falls over.
That's right. And none of these things exist in isolation because they all impact each other.
Yeah.
And so, you might add, income and services, you might add opportunities to the legs of your stool as well. So all of them impact each other. And if one of them goes down, they have an impact on the others. So
Absolutely.
again, back to where we were at the start, so we see people coming in here who are really struggling with their mental health and well-being simply because one of those other legs is not functioning properly. The income has dropped, or there's no access to services or whatever.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, that has a massive impact on people's mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just carry on this conversation for a very long time.
Yeah.
The question that we always land on in these podcasts,
Yeah.
ask everybody is, you know,
Yeah.
if you had that magic wand that you could wave that
Yeah.
would change something in our society that would hugely impact people's mental health and well-being positively, then what
Yeah.
would that be? What would you change?
Oh, great question. At the risk of kind of like repeating myself, I am going to like, I just think this perhaps the single greatest thing that we could do is ensure that people have adequate income, that everyone in society, that we would guarantee that there is this floor that we are not going to let our citizens fall below, so that they have the right amount of income so they can live a decent, dignified and healthy life, because I think that that's the foundation that you stand upon to do the other things. I don't think it's going to solve all of the issues that we have in society. You know, we haven't even touched on the conversation of trauma and the impact of that on people's well-being, and poverty causes trauma, lasting trauma, potentially for generations to come. So I know that this idea of a sort of a minimum income isn't going to be a panacea for absolutely everything, but I think it is the single greatest thing that we could do to begin to see that paradigm shift, you know, that we really want in our society towards flourishing. You know, I always say, like, yeah, I'm a passionate advocate for wanting to end poverty. You know, I'm working to do that. I believe that we can do it. And what part of the reason why is because it's not just that in and of itself, it's so that we can see people flourish. And so giving them the kind of foundation in there. So yeah, that's something I'd point towards.
Fabulous. You know, I wonder whether or not maybe in the future we'll set up another one of these and we'll talk about poverty and trauma and the impact and what we do about that. We can put the world to rights on that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I too could have talked all day, and it's been great. Like, even just reflecting before coming and having this conversation, it's just reminded me about like how important mental well-being is, and my own mental well-being, you know, as someone working in this space, and you know, being a leader in an organization, just how important it is, you know, not just be championing and advocating for other people's well-being, but you know, what am I doing about my own well-being as well.
I think that's a really important thing to kind of leave ringing in people's ears as well. You know, this is obviously called People Just Like Us, and we try very much in these podcasts to be able to create a level playing field, to say that, you know, just because, you know, you're a successful professional woman, you know, and you're doing a job with a huge amount of responsibility, and you you look good, and we talked about hoodies, you know, we don't have a hoodie on or whatever, doesn't mean to say that because it looks as if it's all doesn't mean to say that we don't have to do some work ourselves on our own stuff to make sure that we are well.
Without a doubt. And probably like most people, I've learned through not looking after my well-being the very real detriment that can have around taking on too much, about not saying no. I'm an Enneagram 3 for anyone who's interested in that space. And so, the people pleaser in me, she loves to say yes to absolutely everything. And I've learned the hard way the toll that takes, you know, on me. And I know these kind of phrases can feel a bit trite, but they're so true about, you know, the idea of like, you can't pour from an empty cup. You know, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on. And I know, to be the best mum, the best wife, the best friend, the best daughter, the best colleague, best version of myself in the workplace, I know that actually one of the single greatest things I can do is prioritize looking after myself.
Yeah. And perhaps that's where we land on today. And maybe somebody listening to that actually needs to hear that today. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on as a guest today. It really is a pleasure to have you. It's been a lovely conversation.
Yeah,
we really must do it again.
No, I mean, we could have talked for hours.
And again, you know, we always say at the end of these podcasts, if anybody's watching and anybody's thinking, oh, I could do that, I have something to say, then they just need to get in touch with us, because we're always happy to have folks on and folks on for a chat about what they do and what they think. It gives people a voice. We talked about that earlier on. And you know, bring your voice voice here. Know that it's a space that you can actually have your voice and you can actually talk about what's important to you. But
Yeah, no, thank you, Shona. Thank
thank
you.
you so much. It's been so lovely to have you. So thanks for coming.